Welcome to a hybrid special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the St. Helena Unified School District. Today is Thursday, July 21st, 2022. I would like to allow the translators an opportunity to explain how the interpreting feature on Zoom works.
Buenos días, esta es la reunión híbrida que tiene la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar del Valle de Napa el día de hoy, 21 de julio del 2022. En la parte baja de su pantalla van a ver una figura con el globo terráqueo, le pueden hacer un clic allí y va a escoger el idioma español para que ustedes puedan escuchar esta conversación en el idioma de su preferencia, en este caso el español. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. As permitted by the passage of Assembly Bill 361 and the adoption of Resolution 21-41, today's meeting will be held in a hybrid format. I am Lisa Pelosi, Board President, and I would like to introduce my fellow trustees and district staff members. Board Vice President, Mr. Julio Holguin, Clerk to the Board, Mrs. Jeannie Kerr, Trustee Mrs. Maria Haug, and Trustee Mrs. Laura Simon. Also joining us is district staff. We welcome our new superintendent, Mr. Ruben Aurelio, Chief Academic and Human Resources Officer, Mr. Christopher Heller, Chief Business Official, Mrs. Andrea Stubbs, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Governing Board, Ms. Erica Madrigal, and our Director of Information Technology, Mr. Derek Machado. Item 2A is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
As most are in favor of the motion, Ms. Madrigal, will you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr? Aye. Trustee Holguin?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carries. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to jump into item 4, which is the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains routine items judged as appropriate to be acted upon in one motion. If a board member requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda, the item will be considered under discussion and action items. Is there anyone present who wishes to comment on this agenda item? Were there any written comments submitted by members of the public?
No, there was no written public comment.
Trustees, do you have any questions about this agenda item? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
As most are in favor of the motion, Ms. Madrigal, will you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Simon? Trustee Haug?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Holguin?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item 5A is the approval of the Memorandum of Understanding between St. Helena Unified School District and Little Backpacks Preschool for extended programming. Mrs. Andy Stubbs, please.
Thank you. And I'm really excited to bring this contract over $25,000 to the board this morning. This would be with Little Backpacks, and it would be for providing some after-school programming during the school year for eligible TK students using some expanded learning program funding. And it's all part of the Universal Transitional Kinder program that the state has authorized and is moving us forward on. And so all the details are included in the MOU, and I would very much like to thank the preschool Little Backpack staff for working with us on the development of this MOU and offering to provide this programming for our students.
Thank you. Excuse me. Is there anyone present or participating via Zoom who wishes to publicly comment on this agenda item? Okay. Trustees, any questions on this agenda item? No? Great. Is there a motion to approve the MOU between St. Helena Unified School District and Little Backpacks Preschool as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. As most are in favor of the motion, Ms. Madrigal, please conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Holguin?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 5B is the review and request of approval, AB 1200 public disclosure documents associated with a tentative agreement between the California School Employees Association, number 287, and St. Helena Unified. Mrs. Andy Stubbs again, please.
Thank you. And during the June 16th board meeting, the board approved a tentative agreement with SHTA, our teachers union, and also the public disclosure documents associated with that agreement. And today we're asking the board to approve just the public disclosure documents associated with the tentative agreement between the district and CSEA, our classified union. And so this outlines the impact of that agreement on our multi-year projection. The most recent board-approved multi-year projection was part of the June budgeted adoption package on June 16th. And so what you'll find is that this does change our financial outlook somewhat. And based on our most recent projections, we now have a budgetary deficit of approximately $732,000 projected for 2022-23 as a result of both the SHTA and the classified bargaining agreements, and then a deficit of about $254,000 in 23-24. And the reason we've got a little bit more of a deficit in 23-24 would be associated with the retirement incentive that the tentative agreement includes for CSEA in alignment with the SHTA contract. And so that adds some additional one-time costs to 23-24. And then for 24-25, you see we've got just a modest budgetary deficit projected then, and that would just be that 1% ongoing increase that you see there.
Okay.
Yeah, so the deficit is bigger in the first 2 years because of the 3% off-schedule salary payment to each group, and then the cost of the retirement incentive for CSEA in 23-24. The cost of the retirement incentive that's in the bargaining agreement with SHTA is already in the multi-year projection.
Okay. Thank you.
Board approved.
Is there anyone present or participating via Zoom who wishes to publicly comment on this agenda item? Nothing. Okay. Trustees, any questions or comments about this agenda item?
For the retirement incentive, how many people are is it an estimate based on projected people that would take the incentive, and that could change?
Yes, that's a good question. That is exactly what we did, an estimate based upon about 5 retirees, but that could change.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else? Any questions? No? Okay. Laura, you're good as well? No questions? Okay. No, that's okay. Just making sure. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the AB 1200 public disclosure document as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. As most are in favor of the motion, Ms. Magical will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carries. Item 5C is the approval of contracts over $25,000. Mrs. Andy Stubbs again, please.
Thank you. And these would be for 2 independent services agreements between the district and 2 non-public school agencies for the 2022-23 school year. It's part of our special education program. It's already in the budget. And usually these come to you in August, but we were pleased to be able to bring them to you in July before school starts in August because of the benefit of having that special board meeting this month. And so with that, I would ask the board to approve these special ed contracts.
Thank you. Is there anyone present or participating via Zoom who would like to publicly comment on this agenda item? Okay. Trustees, any questions about this agenda item? No? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the contracts over $25,000 as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
As most are in favor of the motion, Ms. Madrigal will conduct a roll call vote.
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
President Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, item 6A is an update on the St. Helena Aquatics Complex pool repairs. Mrs. Andy Stubbs.
Thank you. And last year, we were looking at replacing our pool liner. And the board determined we should wait due to the ongoing water shortage, the water emergency locally. And so the reason that we're bringing this back to the board just as an information item today with potential action August 18th is because we had some other equipment failures recently. And so we wanted to just circle back to our whole plan for pool management in the wake of those equipment failures. And so where we are currently, our chlorine pump broke, which caused the pool to close Friday, June 24th. And we have repaired that pump. However, in a separate incident, our main pool pump broke down, and this was due to a backflow preventer. And all these parts are about 8 years old, and we learned that there was some corrosion on the backflow preventer, which was causing the failure. We've since done a little bit more research and learned that that backflow preventer was not on our original list of equipment that we should check every year. It's kind of a smaller part. And so now we've added that to our annual checklist. Additionally, technicians have recommended a different type of backflow preventer that we may want to install. And so we're working as quickly as we can to try and get these repairs completed. Currently, we're awaiting a quote to actually remove the main pump from the pump pit and then evaluate it to determine if we need to replace it or if we can just repair it. And so while it says here that the soonest that the pool can reopen would be July 25th, I would say that that deadline is obsolete now, and I think we're looking past July 25th because we have to have technicians to come out and evaluate what type of equipment to use to even remove the pump to then evaluate it. So we're a little bit delayed there. With the pool liner, there have been no changes to the condition. We still have that, the bubbling has not increased. So that's good. And so the board will, in the subsequent slides, see a recommended timeline for draining the pool and then replacing the liner under warranty. And we don't need to do it this fall. We can still continue to delay and we can continue to monitor the condition of the liner. Oops. And so we committed to the board that we would take a number of steps prior to preparing to replace the liner. We notified the city and the local businesses that the work was going to be postponed that happened last spring. We've been continuing to monitor pool equipment and conditions. And we have checked with our insurance group who confirmed that our water drainage plan was sound, and they reviewed and approved our application form, which the board can look at as part of the board agenda, and it's also within this presentation. Additionally, we wanted to obtain a written analysis from an environmental engineer that would identify any impact to neighbors resulting from refilling the pool. Because we want to do it in such a way as to minimally impact our neighbors so they're not dealing with water issues themselves. And we did talk to an environmental engineer who confirmed that he didn't perceive there to be any problem with refilling the pool and impacting the neighbors, and he could give us a written opinion to that effect. It would cost approximately $1,000, and when I talked with him in the spring, his workload was such that he wasn't able to do it at that time. I told him I would circle back with him this fall. I've got a call into him, and I'll follow up on that. And then another one of our steps was to develop a process for notifying the community about the availability of our recycled water when the pool liner replacement is scheduled. And so we did develop that process. Joe and I are Director of Facilities and Aquatics. And we did develop an application form. And Erica, if you wouldn't mind just clicking on the purple link there. Should be a live. Oh, okay, so the link is not working? So we did establish a priority group with regard to who may take the recycled water, with first priority going to fire departments within Napa County, second to other city and governmental agencies. The third priority would be nonprofits, and then fourth and fifth would be private citizens, but they would need to take a minimum of 10,000 gallons. And then so within the application, we've got a little bit of the timeline and the process stated. The applicants would have to indicate the number of gallons that they were requesting. And then if we can go to the second page there, Erica, thank you. They would also have to describe their water collection plan, because they will be responsible for collecting the water. Thank you. And then if we can go back to the presentation. And then, as I mentioned before, the board would then approve this plan during the August 18th board meeting, and we will share it with members of the Business Operations Committee as well for feedback. We haven't yet scheduled those meetings, but we would email the information out to them and get some virtual feedback. And then once we implemented this plan, we would of course follow up with public communiques. Some other considerations, we're hoping to repair. We've learned that the company cannot replace the liner until October at the earliest, and so that caused us to want to do a shorter term repair for the pump equipment that went out. So we're hoping to complete those repairs as quickly as possible so that we can get the waves back in the pool so they can practice before the meet on September 17th and 18th. And the Waves have also offered to provide some Saturday recreational swim sessions once the pool reopens, so that we can mitigate that loss of the pool for the community during the summer. And we did confirm with Mr. Farrell, our athletic director, that the pool is not needed for our high school students until February 2023. And we did check once again with the city of St. Helena to determine if we could transfer the discharged water to them, and unfortunately we're not able to do that. Finally, any unclaimed water that is not claimed by others would be treated and then discharged into our retention ponds. The last couple of slides shows our recommended timeline for the work if we are to do it this fall. Let's see, if we've talked already quite a bit about the pool equipment repairs. And upon board approval, potentially on August 18th, we would then notify the city of the planned drainage. And then we would implement our public notification and application process for reclaiming the water. And then preparing to drain the pool, replace the liner in November with water balancing and testing, followed by reopening on November 28th. So with that, I would ask if the board had any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone present or participating via Zoom who wishes to make a public comment on this agenda item? Nothing? Okay. Trustees, any questions or comments about this agenda item?
I have a couple of questions. Andy, do you know if the current liner can take us through to another year with, like, up to November or December of next year?
I believe that it could, and I would like to ask Joe Perez, our Director of Facilities and Aquatics, to come to the podium and respond.
Thank you.
Hello. According to Mirtha, they've taken a really close look at the liner. The liner doesn't look like it's going to fail for any tear or rip and cause any real damage. They really just want to get in there and smooth it out and make it look like it's supposed to. So it should be able to last. These bubbles have been in the pool for quite some time, and they have, and only in the panels that have the bubbles have any more showed up, and then it's stopped. The bubbling has stopped. It's just still there, so they want to get in and repair it. So it should be able to last for another year or so, but we want to get in and get this done so that the pool is functioning and looks as it should.
And Along that, the warranty, they allowed us to continue. There was no
Yes.
deadline on the warranty.
No deadline
given-
on the warranty.
Great.
Bertha said at any moment, and they were, as we were looking into this situation, they were, they gave us a courtesy and said, yeah, we'll try, we'll move things around to get this done at the same time, and then their labor said we can't find any time until October.
Okay. Laura, did you have another question or no? Okay.
So then on, this would be part of the, in addition to it, how about rain delay? If we have like an early rain, so we have October rains, would we be able to still do the work and things with this?
Yes, they can do it in the rain.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I just be reminded and I apologize if we don't have this information on hand, what was our original budget for the replacement of the liner? We originally said that we were going to be replacing the liner, but now that is all covered by the warranty.
It was 10,000 a year for, I think it was 100,000 was the approximate replacement cost, and that cost would not be needed anymore. The warranty would start again for another 10 years.
And I would want to confirm, we were setting money aside each year in Fund 40
Yeah.
towards that replacement.
Yeah.
And if it's not under warranty, I would want to confirm for the board at a later time what that cost would be. Yeah.
So, again, for clarification, are we still putting money aside in the budget for the warranty, for the replacement? Is that a specific set aside that we're still doing, or have we taken that out of the budget?
That's frozen, but it is included due to the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic and the wildfires on our district finances. We temporarily froze that. We do have money earmarked, and I don't recall the amount, but we have saved up some over the past few years towards that, and I can give the board a report. And our budget assumptions include rebuilding that contribution to Fund 40 for that purpose.
So then could that money be allocated to the pump replacement, or does that come from a different pot?
With board approval, it could be allocated towards pump replacement. We are awaiting the quote to do that work, and so I'm not certain how much that will be.
Great. Okay. I had just a comment than a question. There's a very good chance that water rationing is going to come back into a phase, and that's probably going to happen September, according to the water department. So I just want us to be really mindful that if restrictions come back into place, that we have to once again really give a lot of thought to whether we want to drain this pool and refill it, because the optics on that don't really look great. So, and if we can get one more year, out of the liner, it might be something for us to consider. The water department obviously can't predict, but just from what I do in my work life, and talking to them in other projects, they're already telling me to get ready for phase 2 of restrictions to be coming back into place. So I just think we need to be mindful of that as we move forward on this. But I don't have any other questions, so.
I have a clarifying question about if taking the water out and then we're going to treat it and then donate it, can we take it out and store it and then put it back in?
So
Joe?
480,000 gallons.
Yeah.
And most water trucks are.
There's not like a SeaWorld nearby. We can
No,
just,
it's,
okay.
and most trucks-
Yeah, obviously not knowing anything about that. I just wanted to ask.
Just for scale, a water truck, a large water truck would hold 3,500 gallons.
Yeah.
And then a fire engine holds 1,500. And 480,000, you'd see, 70 or 80 trucks.
So an impossible task. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
And so this will come back on August 18th to gain direction on whether or not to move forward this year or potentially delay for another year at
Okay,
least.
great. And by that point, we will obviously have the estimate for we'll have all that kind of information in front of us as well. So, okay. Trustees, any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you both for your time and putting this information together for us. Okay, item 7A is a study session, which is a review and discussion information about interdistrict attendance and the District of Choice program. And Andy Stubbs, I'm going to call on you for this, please.
Thank you.
It's your day today.
It is. And I always like to start out a study session by framing the questions ahead of time so that the board can keep those in mind as we go through all of the information. These are the questions that the board is going to be discussing today. Number one, if the District of Choice program is extended after 22-23, should we continue to participate? Number two, if DOC is not extended after 22-23, or if it is and the board decides not to continue participation, should students currently enrolled through the program be allowed to remain in the district through graduation? And then finally, if the DOC program is not extended after 22-23, or if it is and the board decides not to continue to participate, should the district implement a new interdistrict attendance policy to allow students residing outside of district boundaries to enroll in the district, for example, through a lottery process? And if so, what should the enrollment caps be for 23-24? And so it's tempting to want to make long-term decisions looking 10, 15, 20 years out as we're considering interdistrict attendance policies, but I would encourage the board to take more of a short-term approach to these questions because there are several variables that are outside of our control that could impact enrollment in the future. For example, not only is enrollment declining at the local level, but it's also declining at the county and state levels. And the future of basic aid funding is uncertain. And then finally, there could be changes or advancements in instructional delivery that cause us to reevaluate enrollment, that in fact cause the state to reevaluate enrollment. For example, possibilities around remote learning. And so just as our district financial reports just include a 3-year look, I would encourage the board to approach their decisions around interdistrict attendance with a 3-year lens as well, circling back to them in 25-26 for future years. And so a little bit of background, during the May 19th board meeting, we did receive an enrollment projection that indicated, that confirmed what we knew before, which is that our enrollment is our residential enrollment is projected to decline through 28-29. We also confirmed that the District of Choice program is still expected to sunset after the 22-23 school year unless it's extended by legislation. And the board identified several steps regarding evaluating its interdistrict attendance policies that will need to occur once we learn the fate of the DOC program. So to recap our enrollment projections, this shows visually the decline that I was describing. We did have an increase in 18-19 due to higher births occurring locally in 2013, and then stronger than usual in-migration of students in 1st, 8th, and 9th grades. And in 18-19, we also had a higher kinder enrollment cap. And then moving forward, enrollment, as I said, is projected to decline, and these statistics do include our current District of Choice students. And as a side note, the board had indicated that there may be some wait lists with our local preschools that they have observed. And so they were wondering about that distinction with, if our enrollment is declining, why are there wait lists at some of the local preschools? And so I did talk with our demographers, and these analytics do include a factor to capture the historical rate at which we see in-migration of students between birth and kindergarten. And so there is a percentage built into this that captures that. However, if we would also like to get some actual current enrollment records from the local preschools, I could share those with our demographers, and they could potentially see if there's any impact to the study based on that raw data. And so these are the planning steps that the board identified. Of course, we need to continue to monitor the California Department of Education for any updates regarding DOC requirements. And it's important to note here that the Department of Education may have their own rules around how we approach students that are currently enrolled in DOC. And we haven't learned anything more about that yet, but we're monitoring them on a regular basis. And then, of course, we need to notify the public that we will not be accepting new DOC applications for 23-24, and that's posted on the district website. And then with the elimination of DOC, the board will need to review and update the following policies and administrative regulations: Board Policy 5117 and Administrative Regulation 5117, which currently is framed around the DOC program. It would then have to revert to an interdistrict attendance policy. And then also Administrative Regulation 5111.1, which is our district residency policy, and we would need to revise that in alignment with AR 5117. And then some of the key considerations that we've mentioned already, we would want to think about the status of our current students enrolled through the DOC program, what enrollment caps the board wanted to consider, and then what would be some interdistrict attendance options with regard to priority groups and so forth. And of course, we would then want to implement and communicate well these new policies and procedures. And of course, I would remind the board and the public that at this time, this is just a study session, an informational presentation with no action taken today. And we would follow up in answering the board's questions with future action. And then as another note, Administrative Regulation 5117.1, interdistrict attendance permits, that can actually be eliminated with a revised AR 5117 because the language there currently is somewhat redundant and we wouldn't need that any longer. So circling back now to the first discussion question, if the District of Choice program is extended after 22-23, should we continue to participate? And so some of the things to consider are listed here. For example, the funding level, if it's extended, is uncertain. We haven't learned anything yet about whether or not they might increase the funding that they grant basic aid districts. We haven't learned any of the other details. Currently, we receive approximately $144,000 for all non-basic aid district DOC students. We spend approximately $32,000 per student per year from our local revenue, and that equates to approximately $3 million spent annually for all of our current DOC students. As we mentioned before, if DOC is extended, there may be new rules associated with it. And if the board decides to continue in DOC if it is extended, then a timeline would have to be established. For example, looking at November 1st of this year through January 15th of 2023 to receive applications for the 23-24 school year. And then, of course, as we mentioned, the board would have to establish enrollment caps for 23-24.
Andy, is this time for a clarifying question or just on the funding that we receive of $144,000? That's for just non-basic aid students. That's students that come from, anywhere basically but Calistoga.
Correct.
Correct. And students that come from Calistoga into our district, we receive what?
We don't receive anything for
Okay.
them.
Right.
Locally also, that would be students from Pope Valley or Howell Mountain.
Right, just
as
to
well.
clarify that. Okay, perfect. Thank
Again,
you.
with that clarification that high school students from Pope Valley and Howell Mountain are able to attend our district in high school if they choose. In fact, the provision with their type of district is they can attend any high school in the state.
Right, okay, thank you.
So just with the nature of that, then they're not receiving funding either.
Correct.
Yes.
Can I ask a question that is probably, it's not as clear that it belongs in this area, and maybe if we address it later, you can tell me. So because of our MOUs with Calistoga, Hell Mountain and Pope Valley regarding special needs students. We do receive funding from those districts when we have a special needs student. So we do not receive funding, in theory, if those special needs students were under the basic aid program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because I'm just wondering, if they're under the DOC program, it's possible that we could be spending quite a bit more per student for a special needs student that is. So I'm just looking at it from, and I'm looking at it from a financial point of view. It could be quite a bit more for some students to be attending through DOC.
Correct, yes, because our special ed mandate is not fully funded, and so, for example, the additional cost of paraeducators might not be covered. And then additionally, if a student comes to us and ultimately requires a non-public school placement outside of the district, those can cost anywhere from $70,000 to $100,000 per student to fund, and with transportation and so forth included.
And so we could be paying up to $100,000 per student in some cases, theoretically, because basic aid does not allow you to distinguish whether the student is special needs or not. DOC, I mean, that's what I said. DOC does not allow you to distinguish between the two.
Correct, yeah. And really, truly, any inter-district transfer policy that the board adopted would not allow us to distinguish between students that required special education per their individual education plans or not, or general education students.
But we still receive the.
Yes. Yes, and there are certain restricted pots of funding for which we do receive a nominal amount of revenue for all of our students that we have, whether or not they're a district of choice. So lottery, for example, we're able to include the ADA calculations for that.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question on that number, the 32,000 per student. Is that something that it increases every year, but has it increased like in the last few years by a lot, or what's the project in terms of future increases?
So the $32,000 per student, that's just local revenue, so that's just our property tax revenue. So as our property tax revenue has gone up over the past several years, although it didn't increase very much this past year, then that figure goes up. So that figure has been going up every year.
But Andy, in that same figure of the 32,000, what part of that, what goes into that is like teacher salaries? It's everything that goes into pay to educate one student.
Yes.
So as compensations increases, that amount also goes up.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And I think we'll certainly pause after each discussion question for.
And still at this point, I mean, we still don't have any guidance from the state. There's no update from the state. They're taking their time to say the least. So, and they could, from what we've learned in the past, I mean, it could be October before they tell us anything.
Correct, yes.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion around number one?
Andy, can you just clarify the 144,000? That is not a per pupil amount. That is the total amount we get for roughly how many students?
For 98.
So 98 students generate $144,000.
Yes.
Okay, and that's an annual.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And Andy, would that money ever increase? Would that 144 ever go up, or is that a formula-based amount? So does that formula get revisited by the county or state level and adjusted?
Yes, it's a percentage of the ADA that we would be
That's-
receiving if
okay.
we were revenue sharing or a state aid district. And so as the Prop 98 funding guarantee goes up and state aid districts get more money, then that would go up for us a little bit too, but not very much.
It's not very much. I mean,
No.
historically, it's never been a very large amount. If
Right, but I believe that when we first started DOC in 2013 or whenever that was, I believe that the state was giving us a larger percentage of, is that correct? And then they reduced it.
Yes, it was 75%, and they've reduced it to 25%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if the state sunsets the DOC program, then we receive
No fund, that's,
$0 instead of
correct.
the 144.
yes, and that's a
Okay.
good clarification. So, and we'll talk a little bit more around the board's consideration of students who are currently enrolled in the DOC program. 2022-23 will be the last year of receiving this funding unless, of course, the program is extended by legislation. And if the board chooses to retain students who are in DOC, provided that their district of residence allows them to stay in our district, we would receive no funding for them other than those nominal amounts for, say, lottery and restricted dollars.
an important point, which you made, I think it's further in there, about the the district of residence giving the okay for the student to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, which may become more difficult as funding changes for school districts, so. okay.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions?
So just to revisit what Lisa says, in the past, there has not been a history of school districts not allowing students to leave their district. But that could change when districts realize that they're going to be losing money when they lose students.
Correct, because under the District of Choice program, the district of residence must allow those students to leave, and then there's a couple of other provisions which we'll see later in the presentation where a district must allow a student to transfer out if they want to. However, if the district of choice goes away and the board adopts an alternative inter-district transfer policy, then the district of residence could say, no, you may not leave. So that'll be an important consideration. Any other discussion or questions just around this one here?
And just, even though you said it's nominal, we are getting the lottery funds, we're getting federal special education funds, we're getting also, do we get something for the cafeteria fund as well?
Correct.
And transportation, or no?
We don't receive any funding at this time for transportation. Other examples would be Title I, Title II, Title III funding for English learners. Our federal and state COVID funds are also based on an ADA, which would include those students.
So actually, when we add all that together, all those little pots, it's probably more than the $144,000 that we're getting from the actual DOC program?
Yes. Yeah, but if we're just looking at the local dollars only and comparing apples to apples, then it would be the 144 compared with the $32,000 that we're spending.
Right, because really, I mean, when you divide that 144 by 98 students, it's like $1,400. So, which is nominal in comparison to the $32,000 we spend per student. I mean, that's
Yes.
really, okay.
Yes, and our restricted funding that's based on ADA, the proportion to our local revenue is really very small. Of course, we have, large pots of one-time money that we're getting from the federal and state governments for COVID, but those will go away.
Right,
We
okay.
won't receive more funding there.
Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to go to the next one, Andy, if you'd like to.
Okay, and then discussion question number 2, if the District of Choice program is not extended after 2022-23, or if it is and the board decides not to continue participation, should students currently enrolled through the program be allowed to remain in the district through graduation? And we've already addressed some of these key consideration points throughout our discussion. And we can take a look at the enrollment figures on the next couple of slides. And again, the State Department may require specific procedures for students currently enrolled through DOC. We haven't learned anything about that yet. We've talked about the fact that the home district may not allow the students to leave. And then just some other philosophical points to discuss. Allowing current DOC students to remain in the district until graduation may help to support their academic progress, sustain class sizes at current levels. So those are things for the board to consider as well. And yes, and so we would certainly need to include language within a revised board policy in AR 5117 to allow these students to remain in the district should the board choose.
I have a clarifying question about that. So when you're telling us that the home districts may not allow them to leave, are you talking about, are you including the basic aid districts?
Yes. Yeah, so a basic aid district, it would benefit another basic aid district to allow those students to leave because then that retains more of their excess property taxes to spend on their students who are within their district. But they could also say, no, we don't want the student to leave.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other discussion or questions about number 2?
I have, yes, and it's got maybe a kind of a little bit at a higher level. So as far as, and we'll talk, and I'm saying, we'll talk about a revenue limit district. So is there like an agreement basically saying, yes, there may be transfer of students to our district? Do you kind of set an agreement at the beginning and say, there may be students from your district coming to our district? Or is it just each student that may want to transfer into our district, they have to go through, you know, where that district is like, no, yes, you know what I mean? You know, how does that work?
Such agreements between districts do exist. However, that's not a component of this particular discussion, but we can certainly get some examples and bring that to the board. Mm-hmm.
So there is agreements like that between districts as far as students transferring?
Yes, I have seen those examples.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Okay, thank you.
And I think, Andy, on the philosophical portion of this discussion question, that's going to kind of materialize a little bit more, I think, as we look at some more slides, because it's referring to academic progress, you know, of students and discussing class sizes at current levels versus what's an optimal class size versus enrollment cap. So am I correct? Am I thinking that that's going to kind of naturally come up a little bit more in our questions here?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And also in looking at those 2 points that Lisa just mentioned, I think that one factor that we should be also looking at, because we have made social and emotional wellness a priority for the district, we have to look at the social and emotional wellness of students that are in our DOC program and the impact that change could have on them.
The next couple of slides do depict our enrollment statistics that you were mentioning. And so these are all the districts from whom we receive inter-district transfer students. We've got 98 currently in the District of Choice program, 21 students who are children of district employees, and then 5 additional who are on inter-district transfer agreements under other special legal provisions. The next slide shows the same data, however, organized by grade level. And then discussion question 3. If the DOC program is not extended after 22-23, or if it is and the board decides not to continue participation, should the district implement a new inter-district attendance policy to allow students residing outside of district boundaries to enroll in the district, for example, through a lottery process that might include priority groups? And if so, what should the enrollment caps be? And here's where we begin to have more of that philosophical conversation as well. So to recap the finances, the district currently spends approximately $450,000 of local revenues to educate one student all the way from transitional kindergarten up through grade 12. And we already mentioned that students who qualify for special education services may require more expensive programs and support. And then how do inter-district attendance decisions impact our own district resident students? For example, and this is a tough question to answer, what are optimal class sizes? Some consideration points include the fact that smaller class sizes may support targeted instruction and intervention better, while larger class sizes can support more robust interaction between students and provide an opportunity for more elective offerings. We have a few more slides associated with discussion question 3, so I'll go through those. With regard to legal requirements, the following students must be automatically enrolled. Of course, district residents, and then students entering 11th or 12th grade who've been previously enrolled under an intra-district transfer agreement. And then with regard to transportation, we do have some legal requirements here in that we must provide transportation assistance for students whose parent or guardian is in active military duty, or for a student who is a victim of an act of bullying. And however, the language is neutral with regard to what transportation assistance means, so that could be in the form of mileage, pardon me, I jumped a slide actually. So this slide here just depicts the legal requirement that a district may not prohibit students from transferring out of their district if they are, if their parent is an active military or if they are a victim of an act of bullying. I jumped ahead a little bit. And then with regard to the transportation piece, we must provide assistance, but that could be in the form of mileage reimbursement or a bus pass. We would want to include a provision in any inter-district transfer policy that would state that we would not be providing transportation in general just because it would not be feasible or sustainable to try and, for example, send a bus out to Napa or even farther to collect students. And I think that's why the language in the Ed Code is somewhat neutral, because there are other ways to support a family that needs it with transportation through offering a mileage reimbursement, which we do currently for some of our special education parents, or a bus pass. Are there any questions or items that the board wants to discuss relative to discussion question number 3? And then the next couple of slides talk about enrollment cap options.
Trustees, you can just, when you're ready, go ahead and ask. And
I'm good with this one. I'm good. I don't
Okay.
have any questions on this part.
so I think, Andy, right now we're saying that we spend at least $450,000 to educate one student for the all 13 years is what that's looking like. We know that number is just going to go up. And we're trying to keep our mindset in a 3-year time frame. It's important for us to really be mindful of finances in this particular issue. I know that it has to be a big part of our discussion and our decision-making when the time comes, because funding in our budget is not unlimited, as we just saw from a previous slide, a present agenda item. It's not unlimited. There's already a deficit. So we have to think about, how many $450,000 scholarships can we offer per year to people without compromising all of our students. And maintaining, maintaining compensation that the teachers are, used to, and our staff is used to. So, those are the kind of things that and it's so frustrating that the state won't make a decision on it to help school districts move along more quickly to decide what to do. So that's just kind of the highlight, just some thought. It weighs very heavily when you see these numbers and think about taking $450,000 and timesing that by 124 students. It's a lot of money. And, we want to make sure that we can take care of our facilities and take care of our staff and take care of all our students. So, so how do we do that? That's where we get to, right? How do we best balance those things? So maybe we do talk about, you've got those slides about like enrollments and that's where it comes into play. Maybe we have to have that part of the discussion first before we can determine this, because I don't have a crystal ball either, nor do you, I realize, but we have to be comfortable in our decision saying, we're okay spending this money, but sorry, when it comes time to do this, we don't have the money anymore to do that. And that's hard for people to always understand. And especially when you're not on this side of it and reading this. It's a very, very challenging situation. And I know we all want to keep our class sizes at a good level. We know that. We don't want class size. This board does not want a class size of 8 people. That's not the intention. But how long can we sustain financially supporting 13 years of educating a student with no revenue coming in for those students? So
That's the question.
that is the question.
That's the question.
And I don't know the answer to that. So hopefully through more conversation today and information, we get to a place that we can see how can we do that without running into a further deficit. So, okay, I'll get off my, I'll get off my phone now.
Well, and I think what you're saying then is that through all of this, kind of the missing piece, that the kind of the part of the puzzle that's really the most important to this. This is all important, but what do we want our enrollment to look like? Right. And I know that that's a conversation that being on the board for many years, we've always had that conversation. What is the optimal amount of students that we want in our district? And how do we get there? Mm-hmm. And how much are we willing to spend?
Right. Okay.
And so it would be a good time, I think, now to take a look at the next slides on maximum enrollment options that the board might consider. And so with a new interdistrict transfer policy, the board would have flexibility in establishing the maximum enrollment each year, as long as class sizes are under the number specified in the collective bargaining agreement between the district and our teachers union, SHTA. And within that contractual agreement, you can see what our maximum class sizes are and optimal. And of course, our average class sizes right now, I would say, are significantly under in TK through 5 at least, and then in most classes, I believe, under in the optimal in grade 6 through 8, and then in most cases as well as the high school under optimal. And so the board could establish grade level enrollment caps in a new board policy AR 5117, similar to what we had with DOC, or they could establish something like a class size capacity, looking at average class sizes per FTE. And so this is an example of what our grade level enrollment caps look like. These are the enrollment caps for 22-23 and projected enrollment as of May 9th.
Andy, has there been a significant change in the enrollment since May 9th then?
I can check with administration and give the board that information in a follow-up communique.
Great, thank you.
And then this would be a sample of what class size capacity enrollment caps might look like. This is an example from the AR from Healdsburg.
Andy, looking at slide 17, I know when I joined the board, I really needed an education to understand exactly what CAPS meant, because I did think of it as that is the capacity, that is the amount of students we will take at each grade, while that is not true. Could you just clarify what you mean? Like, if we're looking at kindergarten, 40 students in the enrollment cap, how to really understand that?
Yes, that's a good question and a good point for clarification. So we set that enrollment cap of 40 for kinder. However, if we receive new students who are district residents, then they must be automatically enrolled. So that's why then you see that higher figure of 46. So we set that enrollment cap as a way to maintain the number of students transferring into the district through DOC, but yet if a new student who is a resident moves into the district, then we must allow them in.
Thank you.
Any other questions about these two options?
So in looking at the Healdsburg Unified AR, we're looking at numbers associated with 1 FTE, but this is also looking at special education classes, which would definitely be a much smaller ratio. So is this really taking into consideration that you probably would have 18 or 19 students per class if you, or is this not including special ed? I'm just curious how they calculate or whether we even know.
This would just be general education. Here you may have students who are in general education classes who have IEPs that just require resource support. This would not include students who are enrolled in a special day class, and we have special caps for those classes, which I believe can't exceed 12 in a special day class.
So actually, the special day classes would not be factored into this capacity determination.
Correct.
Andy, can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
On this slide, if you go back to the one that shows optimum class sizes, in theory, I know we've talked about the per pupil cost to educate our students. If our class size numbers are way below optimum, and we start to add students, theoretically, the funding for that student is already absorbed within the FTE we have. We're not adding FTE every time we add a student.
Correct.
So it's in some ways it's a lot less to educate a student potentially if we already have the staffing.
Correct.
It's really the impact starts to be felt when you have to add to the budget, when you have to add staff, add services.
Yes, and that's part, and that's why, of course, the board would want to establish grade level enrollment caps or a maximum class size capacity.
Okay.
So that you're maintaining enrollment at a level whereby you wouldn't have to add staff to take more in.
Because we're budgeted already for a certain enrollment.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So I'm kind of kids. According to the other slide, we've got, in second grade, we've got 16 students that are, let's see, by grade level, slide 11. 16 that are, oh, sorry. 16 that are DOC of that of the 66 across the grade level, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that, so right, second grade is 16, and
Well,
there's,
this, pardon
okay,
me.
that's okay.
This is 21, 22 statistics.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, first grade going in. Okay,
Yes.
okay, or, so now that's going to be 16 going into third grade. I'm just kind of like using this data to look at that sample Healdsburg AR to see about like class sizes and you know, optimum class sizes and funding. I mean, and the funding that goes with it. So, okay, thank you for that reminder that that was last year. So I appreciate that.
So last year's 5 first graders will then be part of these.
So Andy, the difference between doing an enrollment cap and, let's say, using our optimum class sizes, the enrollment cap locks us in to a specific number of students we allow into our district versus using the class sizes where we have some flexibility based on real-time enrollment to decide.
Yes, I would say that that's a good distinction.
When we're looking at the optimum enrollment, does it maybe help for us to look at the optimum classes that we want per grade? Shouldn't we be having that discussion? I think that historically, we've always had 4 teachers per grade in the lower levels plus specials. I think that with our facilities and our capacity in our facilities, isn't that something that we want to maintain? And then if we maintain that going forward, then we would be maintaining a similar robust enrollment at the middle school and high school, because we would be, at the high school especially, we'd be getting the students from Howell Mountain and Pope Valley, and maybe some private schools as well. But I'm just wondering if it's helpful when we start this discussion of what we want our enrollment to be. Isn't that one of the questions? Don't we want to maintain our current staffing as to what historically we've had success with?
Well, so then I guess my oh, I'm going, sorry.
I was just going to say, when we're discussing class size capacity, I think it'd be important for us to obviously talk to the teachers to see what is adequate for them. I mean, we're up here kind of saying this is it, but I think it'd be important to add them in the conversation to see what they feel like is a adequate class size. So that's just something that I think is important, and I think it also helps the board make sound decisions, because we do take the input of the teachers. You know, it's very important to us that we're making decisions because they're the ones that will be in the classrooms with you know, potentially 26 students if that's what they decide.
And that's exactly what I was going to say too. I think it is important that we get our teacher and our staff's voice part of the conversation.
Yes.
As far as the enrollment
Yes.
numbers. Yeah.
But I think it is safe to say that there's no unhappy teachers at the current primary school level with the class size of 12 kids. I mean, there's not, right? I mean, I don't think that's not what I'm hearing from teachers. So, you know, I mean, yes, if they have to have, but that's what they are saying. So, I mean.
There is, and it's kind of from what I hear, it's kind of, it's mixed. It's mixed throughout the district. So it would be interesting it would be nice, I mean, ideally, it would be great to get everyone kind of on the same path as far as what we're going to do. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do that, because I know that everyone has their own opinion about class sizes and things, but I think that we, for us to make our decision, we need to have more input as far as that.
Yes, and I can definitely work with administration to develop a formal teacher
Okay.
staff survey so that we can get those results
Great.
for you.
That would be great. Thank you.
I also just want to remind the board that we do have contract language that speaks to
Right.
optimum class sizes, and we're not near those at this point. So in some ways, we've heard from the teachers union when we negotiate a contract what those optimum numbers are.
And this is a little bit of a side, but and I could be wrong, are we adding a TK position possibly in the future as that requirement increases over time as far as opening up more months for TK enrollment?
Yes, so with the new legislation around TK and over the next 4 years moving towards having all 4-year-olds able to enroll in TK, I think we have determined that we would likely need another position at a certain point. And
Okay.
I think it's about 2 years out, so
Okay.
through this year and next year, we should be fine with the enrollment, and then the year out, we would probably need to add another one. So I think that's 25, 26.
Okay.
And there is, again, no state funding coming for TK for basic aid districts.
correct, other than potentially some facilities funding that we could be eligible for. But you're right, no funding regarding with enrollment.
The other thing to note with TK is the class size for TK is dictated by the state.
Right.
There's a ratio that's separate from this agreement.
What is it?
So this coming year, it's a 12-to-1 ratio, adult to student, and then the subsequent years, it's 10-to-1.
Okay.
Now, that could be a teacher and an aide and have 20 kids. That would get you your 10-to-1,
Okay.
but it's something to keep in mind.
Okay.
And traditionally, we'd prefer to have the ratios in our district for students not to be dictated by the presence of an aide. We wanted the teacher ratio to be, if the requirement is a 10-to-1, in the past, we've looked at wanting to have a teacher in that position rather than an aide. I just want, for clarification to the rest of the board that might,
Right.
because we moved away from, we moved towards having teachers being the primary instruction, source of instruction for our students rather than an aide.
Okay. Okay, so Andy, what would you like us to continue on the discussion with right at the moment?
I think we should move on to the final
Okay.
slides. So the next couple of slides depict our next steps. We've already notified the public, and we will continue to do so, that we're not accepting applications for 23-24 under DOC or another inter-district transfer policy agreement until the board has approved those policies. We'll continue to monitor CDE, and then if it is extended, then we will make a recommendation to the board regarding whether or not to continue in the program. And you can see the associated timeline. And then just to recap, if DOC is extended and the board decides to stay in the program, we would then establish that window for 23-24 applications. And we would need to approve any changes that the state dictated to board policy in AR 5117 and AR 5117.1 required by law. So we would want to keep that AR 5117.1 if DOC is extended. If it's not extended, or if the Board of Trustees decides not to participate, then we would need to, no later than December of this year, we would want to approve that revised board policy in AR 5117 and AR 5111.1, which is the district residency AR, so that we can establish those procedures for the public moving forward with those enrollment caps or class size capacity. And then, of course, we would implement and communicate the changes. and review. My recommendation would be to review these every 3 years at a minimum.
Okay.
And so then this slide here summarizes what we need to do as we're looking at an actual draft AR 5117 that the board may want to consider. So any changes to board policy in AR 5117 we would need to remove the DOC language should that program cease to exist. We would want to retain any language pertaining to our legal requirements for those students that we must automatically enroll. And those students that we may not prohibit from transferring out. Our policy would need to include that language as well. And then what is optional would be adding that provision for students currently enrolled through DOC to stay through graduation, and adding options for inter-district transfer based on priority groups and a lottery process that would be unbiased. And so this may be a good time to take a look at the
Sure.
draft AR 5117.
And Andy, just to clarify as well for the board, the district's already worked with legal and starting to kind of think about what a new inter-district transfer agreement looks like should DOC go away, correct?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. The sample that you'll see here was modified from a sample from Healdsburg, for example, with legal review and legal consult on the best way to establish an unbiased lottery and some priority group procedures.
Okay.
So let's see. So this would be the board policy, and the board policy is pretty high level. I don't think we need to look at that in detail right now during the study session. I think it'd be best to go to AR 5117, and then the second page of that. So if we start at the end, we can see a real good synopsis of what might be a recommended way to prioritize different possible student transfer groups. In the very end, Erica, there's a couple of tables there.
This is the post-legal. Okay.
Perfect. So a recommended approach would be to establish, and maybe we can make it just a little bigger. Oh, thank you. So priority registration group 1A, those students that would be automatically enrolled would very closely mirror kind of the approach that we have now. So it would be district residents, and then students entering 11th or 12th grade who have been previously enrolled under an inter-district transfer agreement, children of district employees who reside outside of district boundaries. And here I'd like to pause for a moment and talk about the Allen Bill. So our current district policy 5111.1, the district residence policy, references the Allen Bill. The Allen Bill refers to students of parents who work within district boundaries, and it could be parents who work for the district or parents who work for somebody else within district boundaries. We've been counseled to not adopt an Allen Bill policy with this new inter-district transfer policy because that would require us to accept either of those groups at the same level. They would all there wouldn't be a way to prioritize them. And so that could create a situation where you've got many, many students coming in under the Allen Bill whose parents work within district boundaries but not necessarily for the district. So by approaching those two groups of students of district employees and students of parents who work elsewhere within district boundaries, through this prioritization process, you can still include them. We're just not adopting formally an Allen Bill. They're just in different priority groups. So that means also that in our board policy 5111.1, the district residency policy, we would need to pull out any reference to the Allen bill because it's addressed in this different way here. And we don't want to lock ourselves into that because then those groups have the exact same priority, and they would have to be allowed into the district at that same level. So then continuing on within this priority registration, we would have one option that the board could consider would be under, sorry Erica, the first box again, would be students previously enrolled through the DOC program, and it describes the inoperative nature of the program. And then finally, students who move from the district's attendance area during their 11th grade year, seeking an inter-district transfer agreement for the 12th year. And so really, other than the two groups of students that the district is legally required to admit, the board has flexibility around including the others in this priority group, or they can add it to a different priority group or not include those students, and that's where the board has discretion. So then if we look at priority registration 1B, automatic enrollment if capacity exists. The next group would be students renewing interdistrict transfer for continued enrollment. Students in grades TK through 10 who move out of the district during the school year who wish to continue in the district. And then finally, another option might be including in this group when the parent or guardian provides written evidence that the family will be moving into the district in the immediate future within the requested school year and would like the student to start the year in the district. And again, the board has discretion around which students to add in this group and how to prioritize them. And then priority group 2, and this would be where we would get into the lottery process, which is described within the context of the AR. When the student has a sibling attending school in the receiving district to avoid splitting the family's attendance, children of parents employed within the district boundaries, that could be a recommended addition to this priority group. And then a student who has been determined by staff of either the district of residence or the district of proposed enrollment to be a victim of an act of bullying. So we're not required to allow those students to attend, but this could be a good prioritization for those students. And of course, again, the district of residence would have to allow those students to leave. And then finally, priority group 3, lottery group 2 could be when there is a valid interest in a particular education program. And then finally, exceptional circumstances unique to the child. And that's there, of course, because while we try and capture every provision within the priority groups, there's always some circumstance that maybe doesn't fit neatly in those. And then cursoring down a little bit, post-lottery inter-district transfers will be placed last on the wait list. And then I think it's important here too, as we look at, within the DOC program, a student who's enrolled through DOC currently, there are no provisions around attendance or behavior, those kinds of things. However, with an inter-district transfer policy revised in this manner, the board has some discretion to include a revocation component. And Erica, if we can just cursor up a little bit past these different tables here. There's the lottery process, and then a little farther up, there it is right there, the revocation or non-renewal of transfer. And so these paragraphs here describe how the principal of a school may recommend to the superintendent or designee that a transfer be revoked or non-renewed for poor attendance. So for example, if the student is engaged in the SARB process, or if the student has had some disciplinary issues. Erica, if you can scroll down just a little bit more, thanks. And then let's pause it there for reading. And so in subsequent...
So If there was an action in theory against a student, if a student was in the SARB process for truancy, is there a trigger number where you would ask the student to disenroll if they were on an IDA in the future, or how does that work?
There wouldn't be anything within the SARB process itself that would dictate the student has reached this level of truancy, and so if they are on an inter-district transfer, it is automatically revoked. That doesn't exist within the SARB policy, to my knowledge, and I think we would want to leave it pretty high level within this AR to allow for unusual circumstances and things like that. And then if we do cursor down just a little bit more, Erica, you'll see that last statement there: the district may revoke a student's enrollment if they are recommended for expulsion pursuant to the Ed Code. So when we're speaking about behavior, there's that particular clause there.
And Andy, this is not unlike what used to, it's very close to what used to exist before DOC. Some of that language about attendance and grades and behavior.
Yes.
Okay.
And is it the, do the parent need to submit every year then? Unlike district of choice, where they don't, once you're in, you don't have to reapply? Is it a reapplication every year for inter-district transfer?
I believe within the sample it would be a renew every year. I'm going to need to review the draft and answer that question.
Okay.
And then additionally in the agenda language, we've got for board review the actual board policy 5117, which is the overarching policy that addresses the details in this AR, which includes the lottery process. And then finally, we've got the recommended 5111.1 District of Residence policy. Oh, thank you, Erica. I misspoke. The AR 5111.1, which legal counsel has recommended a draft that would align with the proposed AR 511.7. AR 5117. And so this would remove language related to the Allen bill and is also updated based on other legal provisions. So I believe if I can summarize next steps, it'll be important to follow up on board questions that were generated during today's study session. Also work with administration on a staff survey per board direction. And then await more information from the CDE on the fate of the DOC program. During the August 18th board meeting, we're planning on providing a written report that summarizes the discussion that took place today so that the public is very aware of the board's work around this. And then we would be bringing back the draft ARs for further board consideration at a subsequent meeting. And so with that, I would ask if the board had any additional questions.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone present or participating via Zoom who would wishes to make a public comment on this agenda item?
Okay, sorry if I seem a little anxious. Brandon Farrell, SHTA president. I want to first start out by talking a little bit about the agreement that Mr. Heller led the district and I led the teaching union, which allowed us to have a voice semi-annually a year about this particular subject. So I feel like that's a step in a good direction, because there were some comments made about getting teacher voice. I want to remind also that our contract allows our organization to have one specific voice in regards to this, so it would not do the teaching union any favors for me to come up to an individual board member and talk about how awesome it was to have 4 kids in my weight class. And that just doesn't do our teaching organization any good. So when we talk about surveys that we want to survey the staff, this is an issue that is an organizational issue, not an individual issue on the survey. Going forward, talking a little bit about 2 things that I've had discussions about in this forum. I want to make myself clear. Caps and preferred enrollments, I guess I'll call it a preferred enrollment. We aren't at a preferred enrollment. I believe, as I look across the district in our 11th and 12th grade current population, which comprises a smaller high school population than that of a preferred high school. There were 75 to 85 kids when they were in 1st and 2nd grade. I want to know what the plan is for currently having 60 kids in our 1st and 2nd grade, because 10 years down the road, that number doesn't seem to mathematically go up. And that is a concern of our teaching union. In terms of the program, there's 2 phases to me: caps and preferred enrollments, and the program we use. The program we use, I've spoken to in the past as well. Primarily, we would prefer to be away from a district of choice situation and allow our flexibility and more flexibility, and I guess I'm blowing up the word right now, but in a intra-district transfer agreement allows us to have a little bit more control over the situation of how kids come into the district. So I'm running out of time, but I'm happy to answer questions as you develop them in this process.
Anyone else?
Hello, good afternoon, or good morning still. My name's Jem Pike, and I am, my husband and I are parents of a soon-to-be 10th grader whose first year in the district was last year as a freshman, Piper Pike. And we tried for about 5, since she was going into middle school, to get her into the district. Both Doug and I work within district boundaries, but Doug's also been the high school golf coach here at St. Helena High School for 16 years. Although not a certified teacher, does not fall into the privilege of allowing our children to go to this district. So I'm asking for you all, when you make this consideration, if we move out of a DOC situation, to take into consideration non-certified, I guess that's the term, I'm not fully aware, but teachers also as a priority group, as well as having a child in the district and allowing her siblings to enter into the district. So we have twins that are going into the 5th grade, and we've been trying for several years to get them into the district. And because the numbers are high, we've been unsuccessful. So now we have finally gotten our daughter into the high school that we've been trying to get to for so many years, and our family split up. So if we move out of DOC, if we could look into putting more of a look at, teachers, educators, coaches that bring up all of our kids as valuable commodities to the district, that would be appreciated. And my last concern would be to really evaluate the, if you choose to go away from DOC, what that looks like for kids that are in the district already and keeping them enrolled through high school, and the ramifications that I know it would do on Piper if she were to be taken out of the school. I mean, she's integrated in it, and she's an athlete, plays the 3 sports, so it would tear her apart. So if you could really think about that, not so much from a financial side, and I get it. I mean, I own a business in this community too, so I get the financial side of it, but there's a lot more at stake. So thank you.
Anyone else?
President Pelosi, I do have a Zoom caller who would
Okay.
like to provide comment.
Great.
Christina, can you please unmute your mic so that you may provide public comment?
Hi, yes, I'm unmuted now, I think.
Yes.
What I wanted to bring up, or what I find very concerning, is that, and it's manyfold, is that on pretty much every board meeting that I've sat in on over the last few years since my kids became a part of the district, they're going into the elementary school, it's always been stated very clearly, Dr. Wilson stated it, that any changes that were to come about in the future, that currently enrolled students in the DOC program would not be impacted. So right now there's a major contradiction at play, because it was communicated on countless occasions that they would not be impacted. And there's been a chunk of this meeting discussing that that's potentially on the table. And then it's also concerning that over the course of an hour-and-a-half meeting, only once has someone brought up the social and emotional aspect of what tearing kids out of school at any age in the middle of their career would do to them on a mental level. Many times finances have been brought up again and again and again, but only one person brought up the issue of the mental well-being of ripping students out. So I find it very concerning that for a district that is very, very well funded, that money matters is at the top of the discussion, and mental health was only brought up once. So I feel like when all this is being considered, our students have had major implications to their learning and growth curve due to COVID and mental challenges because of that. And now that the prospect is on the table of doing something else that would be far more detrimental to their mental well-being and their educational progress, feels like it's not being weighted. So I find that very, very concerning. As is the case too, a lot of talk about enrollment numbers, but not about the mental aspect of this. That's all.
Thank you. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Justin Paniagua. I have 2 children who are, well, one is currently going to school. He'll be in 3rd grade. The other child just got enrolled through DOC, so he'll be starting 1st grade. I think part of it, I wanted some clarification on the $30,000 that are spent, that's per student estimated, or the total amount. Is that inclusive of everything fully loaded? That includes building, facilities, teachers, all that stuff? You can clarify.
That would just be for regular ongoing operational, so teachers, materials and supplies and so forth.
Electricity, water.
Yes, yeah. It doesn't include necessarily large facility renovations and things like that.
But maintenance of those facilities that are not capitalized, correct?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I feel like you're looking at the cost of a DOC student incorrectly then. These buildings, this one's been here for, what, 100 or so years. This primary school, the elementary school, they're still going to be there. They're still going to have electricity. They're still going to have water. You're still going to have a teacher in the classroom. You're looking at this on a fully loaded basis for the student, when it's more like you need to look at the marginal cost of that student. So say you have 100 students, 5% of them are DOC or 10% of them DOC. If you take those kids away, do you then save 5-10% of your costs? Probably not, because you're still powering the building, you're still running the water, you're still paying for that teacher for a smaller class. So to look at it as a $30,000 per student per year basis, I think is a little bit, I don't know, it's kind of masking what the true cost of adding another child to that classroom. Now I know it's going to be more than the $1,700 you get per kid. That's ridiculous, in my opinion. I think the state should give you guys more, but it is what it is. But to say that they cost you $30,000 per year, I don't think is accurate. I think you need to look at it in more, you already got the teacher in the classroom. It sounds like you don't want to lose teachers. Obviously you don't want to add more because of DOC, and I can get that. If I was in your position and that I had the fiduciary responsibility for the school, I would probably do the same thing. But you don't want to take away teachers either. You're already going to have them in the classroom. That one student's not adding more cost to that classroom other than the paper, pencils and things like that. So I think you need to maybe look at it a little bit differently when you're analyzing this and the cost of the student for that full 13 years. So that's just my opinion. Thanks.
Anyone else?
President Pelosi, I'd like to remind the board and members of the public that there was written comment submitted on this agenda item, and that is attached to the agenda.
Yes, thank you so much. Anyone else present who'd like to come to the podium for public comment?
Hi, my name is Jason Moulton. I live in Calistoga. Spoken to you guys before. Thanks for putting this together today. I would say I'm surprised by a lot of the things I've heard. I've followed this quite a bit. And it seems a little disingenuous, some of the things that you've brought up. I don't think it's a day to shine for people like us and for the teachers. And I have heard now on multiple occasions, second meeting, it sounds like the board speaks for the teachers. I've heard it twice now. That's not what I heard. I've talked to these teachers, and I think that this gentleman here made a great point, and I respect that these private conversations that you have with people who want to put their best face forward to you, they're putting their best face forward to you by trying to remain optimistic in a time of COVID and teaching difficulties. So these are all things you should take into consideration. I would hope you would take into consideration. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Madrigal, anybody else on Zoom that's...
We have one additional public comment.
Thanks.
AXR, can you please unmute your mic?
Sorry, I didn't change my work Zoom. My name is Devin Paniagua. I am the wife of Justin Paniagua, who just got up to talk. We have two sons that are, very excited to have our youngest attend the primary school, considering we were a split family last year. So very exciting. I just kind of wanted to reiterate the sentiment that Christina had earlier, where as we were going through this DOC process, we were in a way relieved to hear that once we were in DOC, all of the previous board meetings had sort of mentioned that they would honor DOC standing within the district. Once you were in, you could continue through. So I just want to urge the board to really take previous word and I guess promise in a way to families that are already in the DOC district to not then revoke that standing, because I have to tell you, we own a house in St. Helena, actually just a couple of doors down from Ms. Pelosi, president, and I have been working in St. Helena for I don't know how many years. very ingrained in the community, getting ready to celebrate my 20th high school reunion from St. Helena High School. So I just really, really want you guys to take a look at all of the families in the DOC and just consider not revoking that right when you guys are looking at it for the future if DOC is not continued.
Thank you. Anything else, Erica?
Are there any other Zoom participants who would care to provide public comment? If so, hover towards the bottom of your screen and raise your virtual hand. There's no additional public comment.
Okay, thank you.
I wasn't going to speak, but I feel like I have to stand up and say my piece, specifically for my 6-year-old who just got in. She's supposed to be going into first grade. I have an 8-year-old who's already here. My parents went to school here. I went to school here. My 6-year-old spent her kindergarten year at our preschool to wait out the year and give her another opportunity to get in. So she spent the year at the preschool, is now going in August for first grade. And the fact that I'm sitting here hearing that my kids could get kicked out of the school is so heartbreaking. She has been yo-yoed to preschool thinking she's going into kindergarten. Then she's back at her preschool. Now she's going to get to come here. And the fact that this is even questioned and on the table is so disappointing and so sad. And when you guys think about these kids, these are kids. I understand that there's a financial standpoint, but you signed saying this child is in, and it has such a huge impact on them socially, emotionally, especially for Brooke, who was yo-yoed back and forth. It's truly heartbreaking. And when we got the news from you that she got in, I followed up every single week, and we were so relieved. Dr. Wilson told us once your kid is in, they are in. I know it's in writing, and I'm going to find it. Because it was written, once your child is accepted through DOC, they are in through the remainder of their career here. And now this sounds like a very different story today. And I just urge you to please think about these kids and think about them as a person and not just a dollar sign. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Erica, nothing more online?
No, there are no Zoom public comments.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Trustees, any comments or questions before we?
Just clarification more, because we've heard some comments that we've all had private meetings with staff before this meeting, or you did not? You did? Did you? Yeah, no. So we've had discussions about this. I think maybe there is a perception issue, because we do have to rewrite the AR and the board policy to take into account that DOC students continue. So maybe it's being perceived.
It's a bullet point of discussion.
It's a bullet point of discussion that we have to rewrite this board policy.
Right.
It's not that we're saying that we're reconsidering what we've committed to students. We do have to rewrite the policy. And that's part of the discussion of today. Is that not correct?
You're correct. So DOC in its current state is sunsetting. It will no longer exist. We have not received direction from the state what that means for our current DOC families. We want to get ahead of that. Right. So we're offering up the option of keeping those students. Some of it might be out of our control, the home districts, those pieces, but our intent is to keep our students.
Right.
And that's maybe something that was lost and that maybe we had in our other discussions, maybe it was lost somewhat today.
I would say that that was the case.
So our discussion today is focusing on what we need to do with the BP and the AR and rewriting that and more clarification on all the eventualities that could occur if DOC is renewed, if it's not renewed.
Correct. We don't know yet from the state if they're going to grandfather in DOC for the remainder of their time here, which would, of course, eliminate that discussion. So we want to get ahead of it and make sure we are doing everything possible to keep our DOC students who are here.
Yeah, I'm sad that it appears to be misinterpreted by parents because, you know, when I came onto the board, it was explained to me and by all of the board members, I've heard it at multiple meetings, that we intend to do, to keep all of our current DOCs. So I really want to get ahead of that fire that now has seemed to start, because that is not true, to ease some pain with some parents and some anxiety.
So I'm sorry, I just have, so just to clarify, maybe it is a misunderstanding on our part, but as a DOC parent, I would agree that I was initially told, once you're in, you're in. And so to have it come up on the board that that's potentially not going to happen, that does instill this sort of panic because our kids are invested. So just to be clear, you're saying that your intent is to keep all students that are currently enrolled in the DOC program, unless the district that they come from wouldn't allow them to leave. That's the only stipulation.
Or the state has different requirements that override our decisions. Correct, Mr. Aurelio?
Right, because the state has not determined, all we know is that it's sunsetting, meaning come January, DOC no longer exists.
Okay.
But they have not clarified what that means for our current DOC families. So we're trying to get ahead of that to make sure you all get to stay.
And it wouldn't be a reapplication. Once that's determined, there wouldn't be continued reapplication. There would be just, as we initially thought we were in, we were in to stay.
That is to be determined based on some of the policies and making sure, you know, one, working with our neighboring districts. If we have to convert it to an inter-district permit, there might be some stipulations there of what the process of ensuring. But we want to prioritize the DOC. You notice that point.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
But to clarify, currently enrolled DOC students who may now have to fill out a different application, because if we're moving from DOC to inter-district, that application would be automatically accepted by the district.
Based on the policy we looked at, or the draft, we would prioritize them up in the first category, like essentially like a resident student.
Got it.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make that comment as well. I mean, as a board member, when we came on, I mean, we all were committed to district of choice students. I don't think that, well, anyone here knew that that was going to potentially sunset. So I don't think it's fair for us, or for people to think that we are changing our minds, because again, we didn't know that this was happening. So again, it's coming from the state, and so that's going to have some, obviously, impact on what happens. But yeah, I think that we're in full support of, you know, social emotionally keeping the kids intact and allowing those students to continue. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Closing comments or questions for any of this district staff?
No, I just want to comment on, clarify when you said something about having a private meeting with teachers. That, for me, that's not the case. It's more of just a casual, how are you doing? This is like when we see each other at the grocery store, at a park or something. How's it going? How's the class going? Oh, I'm really enjoying these lower class sizes this year. That's the involvement of any conversations that I have with any of our professional staff.
Oh, and I was talking about our meetings prior to this discussion that we had with district staff, not at the administrative level, not casual comments. Because we did spend several hours preparing for this meeting and discussing all the different aspects of what we're discussing, and maybe because we had those discussions prior, maybe certain things that were said today were interpreted differently because the board members already know where we are in relationship to the continuation of DOC students.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, as most are in favor of the motion, Ms. Madrigal, will you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Simon?
Aye.
Trustee Haug?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?